Hey, good morning. Welcome to Take 5. This week we've been talking about our seventh installment in our Back to Basics series. We're talking about Joshua and Jericho. And the title of the message was The Circle of Faith. And we're just talking about what it's like in life when you feel stuck, when you feel like you cannot make progress, when it feels like you're just spinning your wheels, whether spiritually or in some other facet of life. We're just talking about how that feels and what our response should be in those seasons. And so far this week, we've learned that when we don't know what to do to get out of that spin cycle, to stop spinning our wheels and to finally make traction, when we don't know what to do, we can do what we know to do. We've talked about two things already this week. The first one was obey. We can just simply obey God's last command and obey His word. Then yesterday we talked about the second one, which was to prepare. We can prepare for the promise, prepare for that thing that we're praying for, prepare for whatever it is we're trying to achieve. We can go ahead and start while we're even in this cycle of life where we just feel like we're not making progress towards that. We can still prepare for it. So when the day comes, when we do finally get to our promised land, finally get to the thing that we're striving for, we'll be ready. Today we're going to talk about the third and last thing that we can do while we're in the cycle, that circle of faith where we feel like we're not making any progress or just spinning our wheels. And that third one is just simply to follow. Follow. You and I have to learn to follow the right voice. We see in the story that we're talking about where this is what Israel does. They spend 7 days marching around the city. The Bible said that God commanded them to march one time around the city for 6 days. And then on the seventh day, they were to march around the city 7 times. And then after the seventh time, after the seventh lap, they were to all shout. And you know the story. The walls were going to fall down, and they did. And then they could go in and wage war against the people in the city of Jericho. And so God commanded them to do this. And what I realized when I inserted myself into the story, when I thought about what it must have been like in reality, I realized that there were probably a lot of people that were telling the Israelites they were crazy, that were telling them they should do different things. I can just imagine the people of Jericho sitting in their fortified city. The Bible said that they were so afraid because of the things they had heard God was doing for Israel up to this point that their hearts melted with fear. So they're sitting up in their fortified city. They had all come into the city and closed the gates and fortified everything they could because they were afraid. And now this army, this nation of people that they were afraid of is just looking kind of foolish, just walking laps around the city. They're not pulling out their swords and their spears. They're not getting ready to fight. They're not shooting arrows. They're not trying to knock down the city gates. They're just marching around the city. And so I know without a doubt that the people of Jericho were probably sitting in their city and laughing at the people of Israel, thinking to themselves, why were we afraid of these bunch of crazy people? They're just walking around the city like that's going to help something. Why were we afraid? I'm sure they probably insulted the Israelites. They laughed at them. They joked at them. They might have even thrown things at them. I don't know how it all went down, but I know there were many voices being spoken to the Israelites. And you know what they didn't do? They did not alter their course. They just continued doing what God commanded them to do. And in the meantime, I'm sure they even themselves thought this was crazy. As they were marching around the city, I'm almost certain, because I have worked with people now for quite a few years, I'm almost certain that the soldiers were talking amongst themselves, saying, why are we doing this? What are we doing? This is nuts. We should just fight. We should go. We should try to knock down the city gate and go in. This is crazy. I'm sure they were talking amongst themselves, but no matter what voices they heard around them, no matter what they thought or what the people around them thought, they just followed God. In the middle of this cycle of their life where they just felt like nothing was changing, they were just walking in circles, literally and maybe even a little figuratively, they listened and they followed the right voice. And for you and me, it is so important that we follow the right voice in every season of our life, but especially when we feel like we're just walking in circles. when we feel like we're not making any progress. What I have learned is that when we're in those seasons, everybody has an opinion. Your mama has an opinion, and your in-laws has an opinion, and your friends have an opinion, and your coworkers have an opinion, your boss has an opinion, and people online have an opinion. Everybody thinks they know what you should do to get unstuck, but the truth is, sometimes, and most of the time, all of these different voices give some whack advice, and they can even contradict each other. And it's so important that you and I follow the right voice, the voice of God. Now, I'm not saying that you can never get advice from others. I'm not saying that you should never do that. The Bible tells us in Proverbs 15 that success comes with many advisors, that wise people get counsel from many people. So I'm not saying that we should never get advice from other people, but what I am saying is that every piece of advice that you get from others, you should at least filter through the one voice that we know is true. You should filter every piece of advice and every opinion and everything that somebody else tells you to do. You should at least filter it through the voice of truth. You and I have to follow the right voice if we are going to ever quit walking in circles, get unstuck, and finally find and walk in our destiny. We have to follow the right voice. That means that you and I may have to do some work. We may have to actually read the Bible and learn what God says about certain things in life. We may have to study that thing. We may have to come to church and listen and pay attention and try to put those things into action. It's going to require some work, but we have to follow the right voice. I appreciate everybody else's opinion, and I might even listen to them, but I'm always going to filter their advice through the voice of truth. And ultimately, I'm going to follow God in this thing. Hey, I hope you have a great day today. We're going to come back tomorrow for one more session of Take 5. We'll wrap this thing up a little bit, put a bow on it, and we'll be ready to go into the weekend and come back together Sunday and worship again. I hope you have a great day today. I'll see you again right here tomorrow on Take 5.